Here's a convenient overview of how to choose a measure of central tendency. For interval ratio level variables, we also use measures of dispersion or variability. Measures of dispersion or variability are important as they inform us of how close the scores are in their distribution. Are they distributed close together, or are they far apart? We may calculate a mean self-confidence score of 6, with scores ranging from a minimum of 0 and a high score of 22 in clients who are receiving a new CBT intervention. In our comparison, or usual care group, we calculated a mean self-confidence score of 5.2, which is not that far from the mean of 6 of the intervention group. If we only consider the mean, we could say that the two groups have means that are very similar. However, upon closer inspection, we find that the scores for the comparison group, or the usual care group, ranged from 3 to 8, a big difference from the intervention group with scores ranging from 0 to 22. Therefore, measures of dispersion better inform us of how our scores look alike. Previously, I stated that the usual care group scores ranged from 3 to 8. However, this is different than the term range, a measure of dispersion, which gives the total number of possible values or scores between the minimum and maximum values in the distribution. For example, for the CBT group, the maximum score is 22 and the minimum score is 0. We subtract 0 from 22 and obtain 22. This equals the range of 22 for the CBT group. If we did the same for the usual care group, we would find a range of 5. Considering the means of the two groups, this additional information informs us that there are indeed differences in the distribution of self-confidence scores. Another measure of dispersion is the interquartile range, which indicates the width of the middle 50% of values. We examine the interquartile range in a box plot using SPSS software. Additionally, we can also determine the 25th percentile, Q1, or the 75th percentile. The IQR provides additional information on the measures of central tendency and the range. In this table, we can see the differences in the value as they fall within certain quartiles. Here's an example of a box plot, which is a graphical device that provides the median of the sample scores, the range, the quartiles, the minimum value, and the maximum value, all in one graphical presentation. Our SPSS software will develop this box plot upon our command. The variance is a measure of dispersion that is used by interval ratio level variables. However, we do not often report the variance alone. Yet you do need to understand how it is calculated to better understand how a standard deviation is calculated. Never fear, this gets better with practice. The variance is the average of the squared deviations from the mean. Let's move on to the next slide to make better sense of this formula. Let's say we have 5 cases or individuals in our sample, and they are administered a goal attainment scale, a self-reporting measurement that provides how successful an individual has been in completing his or her goals. A score of 0 equals no goals achieved, and 10 equals all goals achieved. Case or individual number 1 scores 2 on the instrument, as well as case number 2. Case number 3 scores 6, and case number 4 scores 7. Case number 5 scores 3. To calculate the variance, we first need to calculate the mean of the scores of the 5 cases or individuals. We obtain a mean or average score of 4. Our next step is to subtract the mean from each score of each case or individual. In the first case, we find the calculation of 2 minus 4 equals minus 2. We do this for all cases. The results are referred to as the deviation from the mean. Next, we square the deviation from the mean to get rid of the minus signs. We then add the sum of squares, which equals 22. Now we divide the sum of squares by the number of cases, or n minus 1, resulting in 22 divided by 5 minus 1, or 22 divided by 4, which equals a variance of 5.5. You may want to repeat this to get a solid understanding of the formula before moving on to the next slide. Our next and very important measure of dispersion or variability is the standard deviation, a measure of variation used with interval and/or ratio level variables. To determine a standard deviation, we find the square root of the variance, or the square root of the sum of squares, divided by n minus 1. Next, we have an example of calculating the standard deviation. To calculate the standard deviation for a sample of respondents with a variance of 5.5, we find the square root of 5.5, which equals 2.35. And that's the completion of this PowerPoint on the measures of central tendency and dispersion. These measures are very important and should be performed on all initial univariate analysis or analyses of a single variable, as it will contribute to the information needed to determine the type of statistical technique to use in rejecting null hypotheses or answering research questions.